Why is it that I would choose to engage with harmful behaviors or choices, even when I know that I don't want the long-term or even medium-term consequences? I've asked myself that question a lot, especially as it relates to addiction. For me, to a pornography addiction. What I believe is that we become so familiar with and accustomed to the solution that we have put in place in our lives, like choosing to get connection through pornography rather than reaching out to a real person and risking rejection, that we can't imagine what it would be like to not have that desire, or the certainty of comfort that comes from following through on those actions, even if it's short-lived. Our coping strategies and mechanisms are in place for a reason. And it's because we choose to keep using them. We choose to keep being in that cycle. The most famous instance of this probably in the Christian world is found in the words of St. Augustine, or Augustine. Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. While this is quite humorous, actually, and reflects something really human about Augustine and about us, that we want perfection, we want to be made holy, but we're not sure that we want to give up the things that we are currently doing. This is a sentiment that indicates that we don't understand the nature of transformation or the nature of transformed desires, which is no great wonder. How could we understand something that is so spiritual and mystical when we try so hard to anchor ourselves in reality as we see it and know it with our five senses? I once heard a preacher speaking about a particularly sinful behavior that he was drawn to, saying during a talk, I had someone come to me and say after the service one day, and I had somebody come to me after the service one day and offer to pray that God would remove his sin. And I said, no, thank you. I know this sin and how to deal with it. I don't know what would replace it or how to deal with that. That's scary. The error, the mistake that I see in that is thinking that if God were to transform this preacher's desire, then God couldn't transform the temptation to a holy desire instead of needing to be transformed into another form of temptation. Why couldn't God just take it away? I think God can, but we limit that. If I have an illness, such as diabetes, and I pray to God to remove the temptation to eat cake, I don't want to eat cake, which would make me unwell, send me into hyperglycemic coma, potentially, depending on the severity of my diabetes. I don't then assume that God would replace the temptation to eat cake with the temptation to eat sweets or cookies. My prayer would be, God, make me satisfied with what I have. Help me not to crave the things that are unhealthy for me. And I would hope that that would encompass cake and cookies and sweets and all sorts of other things. Another problem that we face is that we cannot imagine what it would be like to desire what's good for us. Our experience is of wanting what is not good for us. I want to fulfill my good desires, the desires that God has given me: acceptance, connection, love, belonging, to be seen as who I am and loved for who I am. But I want to do it the way that I want to do it, not the way that God wants me to. This is short-sighted. But because this is the way that I go about it, it's what I want. And I can't imagine wanting something else. Because that is how I know that I can quiet the need. These are the things that I know that I can do in my control, under my power, to quiet the hurt, to stem the hurting. Or that's the way that I learned in childhood I could earn love. That I could make sure that love wasn't withdrawn from me for doing the wrong thing. In short, I trust my way. I do not yet trust God's way. Dallas Willard, the Christian philosopher, theologian, preacher, and educator on all things spiritual formation, I think he's a great resource, and I think you should check him out. Recalled answering a common question in one of his lectures. At nearly every one of these seminars, some smart person will ask me, can God sin? And my answer is, of course God can sin. This is Dallas speaking. I am then usually asked, well, why doesn't he? The answer is, because he doesn't want to. Because he knows that it would be harmful to himself. God can sin, just as I can stick a pin in my eye. But just because I can doesn't mean that I want to. His point in saying this is that although we all can do things that are harmful to ourselves, if that is what we desire, and we can use an act of will to behave contrary to our desires, we can also change or transform our desire and understanding to want the things that are good for us. C.S. Lewis, the Christian theologian and philosopher, has written that we are children playing in the mud in an inner city housing development who protest being taken to the sea for a holiday because we have no idea what a holiday at the sea would have to offer us. In another lecture, Dallas Willard says that controlled behavior is not the same as having our desires changed. This is the same thing that is taught by Joshua Smith and Dr. Ed Smith, the founders and teachers of the Transformation Prayer Ministry method. The term that they give this is transformed desires. If you haven't checked out Transformation Prayer Ministry, I would highly recommend checking it out. They have some really good teachings, in my opinion, and really grounded teachings and lots of good information. Our will plays an important role in how we behave in the world. When my desires and my will are in conflict, I can choose to act contrary to my impulses created by reaction to sensory inputs and filtered through the default mode network of my brain. The example used by Dallas Willard is that of sexual desire and a cold shower. Cold showers work and can feel like a godsend in dampening our sexual desire that is tempting us to act in a way that we feel is against God's will for us. However, we cannot live in the shower. So disciplining ourselves to submit to God's transformative work in our lives is of utmost importance if we wish to be effective in the work that God has given us to do in the world. The devil does not need to cause us to commit some big sin. If he can instead distract us with small battles and cause us to consume our energy keeping ourselves from sinning, then he has nothing to fear from us in the world. One quite unhelpful thing that I read when I was young, earnest, and impressionable was an anecdote of a youth pastor upon hearing one of the teen boys under his care say that he, the boy, was no longer being tempted to lust sexually. The youth pastor suggested that there must be something wrong with his faith. There must be something wrong with his Christian walk, because if he was not being tempted, then the devil must not see him as a threat. The conclusion being that temptation to do wrong is evidence that you are on the right path, and a lack of temptation means that you're not living a faithful, holy life. I see this as a dangerous thought process because we are then encouraged to stay just tempted enough, or to take pride in our temptations, when I could also take the evidence of the fruit of the Spirit as confirmation that I am living and walking in the path that God desires me to take. I don't need the deceiver and his minions to confirm that I am on the path to righteousness or being an effective agent for the kingdom of heaven. God is most certainly wise enough and big enough to do that on his own, or with the help of his faithful servants, whether angels or human. As I understand them, desire is the result of emotional and experiential processing through the pathways in the brain that act to keep me alive, fed, and ensure the continuation of my genes. This is part of the brain that is shared with most animals that we know and is the shortest path in the brain from input to action. Input is received from the five senses, and the brain looks for similarities to past experiences and events to assess threat in the shortest amount of time possible so that we can react in time to save our lives. Possibly so that we can react in time to save the lives of others as well. Will is a uniquely human attribute that takes my memory, emotions, knowledge, reason, and intuition, filters and weighs them against the perception I have of the world and how I want to be, to choose what I want to do. This is the part of my mind that allows me to actively choose the thoughts and behaviors that I want to cultivate and reproduce. Take an example. My dad is mildly allergic to peaches, or at least he was when I was growing up. Neither I nor any of my siblings were or are allergic to peaches. The smell of peaches was also always enticing to me and produced a desire to eat them. Even the feel of the fuzzy skin brought to mind the pleasure of eating a ripe, juicy peach, especially fresh from the Okanagan. My dad found a different reaction to the smell of peaches. His brain would trigger physical sensations that mimicked his allergic reaction to eating the peach. The same sensory input, smell of a fresh Okanagan peach, completely different reactions from both of us. However, if my dad were starving and had the choice to eat a peach, given that his reaction is mild, his will could override his impulsive desire, and he could eat the peach. This example maybe does not fully explore the nuance of human will, as the example of food could be applied to an animal as well, but perhaps the example gives you an idea of what's going on. There are examples like this for all types of sensory inputs, along with several reactions to each one in different people or at different times. Desire is not static, and neither is will. One of the great secrets of the brain, revealed to me by the teaching of Dr. Marissa Peer, is that it likes what it knows. That which is familiar and predictable feels safer than what is unfamiliar and therefore unpredictable. The brain, in trying to keep us alive, holds tight to what it knows and pushes what it doesn't know away. Perhaps that is how I can keep the desire and harmful actions that result, rather than taking the promise of renewed desire and new action. I simply do not know what that will look like, and therefore can't imagine what it will feel like, and that doesn't feel safe. To eat vegetables as an adult, now that I really enjoy vegetables in almost all of their forms, I find that I crave the way that they make me feel and love the taste and smell and texture, no less than I loved the taste and smell and texture of a hot dog as a child. I no longer desire the hot dog because my taste has matured, and I've found more pleasure in nourishing food and drink because I now associate the taste and smell with feeling really good about my body and feeling energized. The truth that transforms my taste for food, and it can transform my desire for other pleasures too. Instead of being intoxicated by the mob mentality when joining in to pick on a schoolmate or colleague, we can become intoxicated by the joy and love of connection with that same person and loving who they are. How can I want something that I don't know? So I believe that giving over my desire and submitting to God's will means that I'll have to do something that doesn't seem fun. I'll be a fuddy-duddy or a prude or a square, having to always experience the pain of being on the other side of the cool group, acting outside of the group consciousness, examined or unexamined. If my desires are transformed and I value the approval of God, then being accepted by one or another group of people is not so necessary. If I know that I'm accepted by God, then the accepting myself is easier, and being accepted by others is unnecessary. The teacher and coaching master, Anthony Robin, teaches that there are 6 human needs. 6 human needs, not wants or desires. These are certainty, uncertainty, love, connection, significance, contribution, and growth. Each of these 6 human needs can be fulfilled in healthy ways that contribute to the well-being of ourselves and those around us and the world, or we can look to get fulfillment of our needs in unhealthy ways that damage us, hurt the people around us, or the world. It is good to recognize that people will violate their principles and values to meet their needs, and by acknowledging this fact and practicing a little bit of self-empathy and forgiveness, we can recognize what is missing and begin to meet our needs in healthy and productive ways. Often we do not want to have our desires taken away because we're not sure what will replace them. I have an assumption that I will end up doing things that I don't want to do if God chooses my actions, instead of realizing that transformation of my desires will result in changed action, and I will be as happy or happier with the actions that flow out of my changed desire as I am with the activity that stems from my tainted desires. A child may not be able to imagine what it's like to enjoy eating vegetables, but once you enjoy eating vegetables, this will no more be a chore than eating a hot dog is for a child. Transformed desires is also therefore a sign of maturity. If you like what I've been talking about, please click like, subscribe to my channel, click the little bell, and you can check out all of my content as it comes out. You can also follow me on YouTube. Well, you can follow me here on YouTube, on Instagram, and Facebook. I'm at Granite Bear Coaching. Bye for now.